Dr. Morgan Taylor is a highly regarded sex therapist and somatic sex coach dedicated to empowering women and couples to unlock deeper levels of connection, pleasure, and intimacy. Through her private coaching, transformative couples retreats, and the comprehensive online resources of the Pathway to Pleasure Collective, Susan guides individuals and partners on a journey to restore and deepen their intimate bonds. She utilizes her proprietary Pleasure Keys process, a unique methodology designed to help couples navigate challenges, enhance their erotic lives, and cultivate a more profound and joyful understanding of intimacy and pleasure. We've already been talking before I hit record, and I know this is going to be a good one. So I've already exposed some of the things that concern me, and I'll get into those as we go along. But first of all, you're super welcome. Thank you very, very much for joining us. It's very, very generous and very kind of you. And I wanted to take you back a little bit, if that was okay, just to explore a little bit about who you were in your formative years and whether you can see a path between the person you were then to what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of other sexuality professionals would agree with this statement is that none of us really wake up as children and be like, I want to be a sex therapist. So that came a little bit later in my own personal journey. But as a child, I was always geared towards helping others. And I always knew that I wanted to be in the healing arts, doing healing work and counseling work and helping other people. That was always a very natural inclination for me. The interest in the sexuality piece really came many years later after I left a sexless marriage. And sexlessness wasn't really the only reason I left, but it led to a whole awakening a couple years after that marriage fell apart, where I really realized that I had never really taken responsibility for my own pleasure. I was in that marriage and feeling very shut down sexually. I actually was the one who was not interested in sex. I could have cared less and didn't want it with my partner. But what was interesting is I still had this desire. I really wanted a deep connection. I wanted a deep sexual connection. I just had no idea how to create it. And I didn't have the capacity or the education or the knowledge to really know what was going on and what needed to happen so that I could create that within my marriage. And it's possible maybe it wasn't going to be possible in that marriage for a lot of other reasons, but nonetheless, what I ended up doing was kind of blaming my partner and kind of putting it on him for him not knowing how to do it or how to make it deeper and more spiritual, whatever, all the things that I was wanting. Of course, I wasn't really communicating this, mind you. So a couple years after the marriage ended, I found myself in another relationship with someone who had a whole lot of training in sexuality and promised all these amazing experiences. Oh, you want to feel a full body orgasm? I can give that to you. Well, he did not deliver. And it was a brief relationship, it ended almost as fast as it began. But where it left me was really realizing, wow, I've always made the man responsible for my pleasure. And I've never stopped to really take the time to learn my own sexual nervous system. And surely if he says he can give me a full body orgasm, well, it's my body. So there must be a pathway within my body that would allow that experience to happen. So I set out on a mission to find that pathway. And amazing things happened. As soon as I made that declaration, all kinds of things started happening. I had a chance encounter with a somatic sex therapist that absolutely changed my life. I had a book jump off the shelf at me at the yoga studio that gave me a whole new way of understanding how to approach sex. And I made a dedication to learn my own body. So I made a date with myself once a week to set aside time just to be with myself intimately, to self-pleasure. And that was really where I made the absolute biggest breakthrough. So it was sort of a conglomeration of these things coming together, but really that dedication to start to discover, what do I feel? What feels good? What doesn't feel good? I didn't even actually have a lot of sensation in my genitals, which was really surprising to me. And during one of those self-pleasure sessions, this was maybe only several weeks after making this declaration and having these, odd experiences happen with meeting the somatic sex therapist and the book. A few weeks into this, I had a moment during a self-pleasure practice where I had a wave of pleasure that started in the bottom of my feet, rose up through my whole body, and all this love and pleasure shot out of my heart. My hands are like vibrating. My face feels numb. All this energy, pleasure, and love is just rushing through my body. And in that moment, I realized, like, oh my God, I'm having a full body orgasmic experience. And what really landed for me in that moment was this realization that love, pleasure, and orgasm are natural states that already exist within us that we always have access to. The problem is that we have a lot of debris that's just covering up. That's an obstacle to our ability to be able to experience ourselves as love, as orgasm, or to access the pleasure that's already within our own bodies. It's not anything that somebody can give to us. Nobody can really give us pleasure,
Mm.
give you an orgasm, give you love. Yes, we can express our love. Love is it was what I am. So it was a very real moment, and that was the moment where I made this. I knew I have got to help other women understand this and find this pathway to their own pleasure, because I really believe the world would be a different place if more women were able to access that more easily, and we had the understanding that it's not something that we have to get or cling on to a relationship or put on a man to have to do for us, that we have to find that path within ourselves. And I was very blessed about 6 months after that whole awakening to attract a lover into my life who was really interested in learning some of the stuff that I had been playing with and growing. And so I was really able to translate what I had discovered within myself into a relationship. And that was just a very healing and beautiful experience. And that was really my defining moment of I am going to become a sex therapist. I was already in graduate school at the time. Actually, I was 2 semesters into my graduate study in professional counseling. And so that was really, it really led me forward through the end of my studies into opening my sex therapy practice and starting to work, originally wanting to work with mostly with women, which I am a specialist in women's sexuality, but interestingly enough, it was couples who showed up. So I really leaned into that. So now I'm a specialist in working with couples.
Gosh, that's quite a lot. Have you managed to replicate the feelings you had when you had that full body orgasm? It's part of who you are now?
Well, it's a pathway. It's
Yeah.
really just a pathway. And I think where we can get stuck a lot of times is we try to recreate an experience that we had yesterday or last
Yeah.
year, or, couples do it all the time. We want to get back to how we were when we
Yeah.
met. Well, you're different people now. And your nervous systems are different, and your hormones are different, and the context of your life is different. So it's not so much about recreating an experience, but once those pathways, I had learned how to open them and how to access them, yes, it becomes much more easy to be able to access them because I knew the way and I
Mm.
kind of knew the things that needed to be in place to be able to allow myself to access those. And so some of the pleasure keys process that you spoke about in my
Mm.
introduction, that's part of what that work is based on, is really learning how do we access that, and what are the things, there's very simple principles and practices that help us be able to cultivate the access to our deep pleasure and orgasmic states. It's really like almost like I don't want to say a recipe because it's not written, it's not really a technique. It's really a matter of, it's an approach and it's an understanding of when these things are in place and when we've cultivated these particular principles and skills, it's like we know the roadmap and it's not such a mystery or just happen chance, right?
Mm.
Happenstance, like, oh, I just happen to be in the mood. The wind is blowing the right direction today. No,
Yeah.
like we can literally be intentional about it when we understand the roadmap.
Because it's one of those things that I guess since relatively early childhood. So if I had my hands down my pants and I was sort of, I don't know, 2 or 3 or something, I can remember somebody sort of slapping my hand and saying, "Oh, it's dirty." And if we get to that age where we're going to puberty and we start to masturbate, whatever, there's certainly that intention to almost get it over with as quickly as possible, in case somebody bursts in the room, or whatever. And I actually talked to a tantric coach, and she was saying that it's interesting that we don't take the time, or if you ask somebody, or if you ask me, have you ever spent an hour just or 2 hours just exploring your body?
Mm-hmm.
And do you know that you might find your shoulder blades are really sensitive, or your clavicles super sensitive, but like say you might have very little sensation in the genitals or wherever you're meant to have them, but we don't, do we? We're never ever taught at any age during sex education, anything like that at all. Almost the furthest thing from it. How do we understand our own bodies? And as you said, how do we try and own or understand our own pleasure? Because if we can't understand our own bodies, how can we possibly expect somebody else to know what turns on and what works?
I mean, you just said it right there. If we don't even know our own bodies, how can a partner know it better than we do? And I think also what you speak in sex education, if you've even were lucky to get it. I mean, back in my day, we had, in science class, we got a
Mhm.
little bit, but it's all about the reproductive
Yeah.
act of reproduction. It's no one's teaching you about actual pleasure or relation, the pleasure part of sex. And if anything,
Mm.
it's a fear tactic of like, don't do this or you're going to get an STD or get pregnant. Like,
Yes.
no
Yeah.
one's like, it feels good and here's how to make it healthy and safe. And
Yeah.
like that conversation would be so much more useful. The other piece is that we're very goal oriented, generally speaking. So it becomes all about the release through the climax,
Mm.
about just getting to the finish point because we don't even understand that other things are on the buffet. And that was the big game changer for me when I was going through my original exploration where I had that
Mhm.
big awakening. The approach that I was taking was about the non-goal oriented approach, like getting rid of climax, like just completely taking that off the table. So it wasn't about, I wasn't touching myself in order to get off. And I also set aside mental fantasy because what I was really wanting to do was cultivate my capacity just to feel sensation in my body. And what I would do a lot, and I didn't even know this about myself, I really relied a lot on mental fantasy in order to climax, in order to orgasm.
Yeah.
Every single time, it was what I would use, and I'd get off, and it'd be fine. And I didn't even know that there were other options available. And so that's part of the path. It's part of the pleasure keys process, as well as learning how to just notice sensation, how to you can always go back to the way you've been doing things. But I wanted something different so badly for myself that many years ago. I just wanted a different experience. And I knew the only way I was going to get it is if I did something different. So we can always go back to what's familiar and
Mm.
what the habit is. But when we want to train ourselves to have an expanded capacity for pleasure and an expanded capacity for orgasmic experiences, when we want to have a deeper connection with another human, we start with ourselves first. And one of the ways we do that is by learning how to be in the somatic experience, meaning the body, the actual sensations that are happening through the direct route of pleasure, which is the nerve endings on the skin directly to the brain, not the indirect route. The indirect route of pleasure is through the visual cortex. So that's watching porn, using mental fantasy, seeing somebody else have pleasure and I get turned on by that. It's a different pathway. And a lot of us get overly dependent on that indirect route to the extent that we lose connection with the direct route. So the direct route of pleasure, it's just a matter of slowing down, getting rid of trying to get anywhere, and cultivating the skill of noticing, beginning to notice sensation. And it's that simple. And my case, the first thing I noticed was, wow, I don't have a lot of sensation. I don't have a lot of feeling. I'm kind of numb. And that was really surprising to me. But it took that level of slowing down, getting
Mm.
present, and really that desire to just be with. Anytime someone says, I feel nothing or it's numb, that is one of the best things you can feel because there's a whole wellspring of other sensations and emotions and feelings underneath that always. And that's why there's numbness is just a way that we protect ourselves. It's a way that we stop feeling. It's like where we sort of freeze in a moment. We don't even realize that we're doing it a lot of times unconscious. That's what the numbness is. It's just protecting us from not feeling something that we didn't want to feel at the time. It's a protective mechanism. So there's always a lot of feeling and potential sensation anytime we encounter numbness, most of the time. I mean, unless you have like physical nerve
Yeah.
damage,
Yeah.
right, which is a different thing.
Mm. So do you think that when we go into when we're seeking pleasure either by ourselves or with a partner, with partners or whatever, that we should go into the experience with an intended outcome? Because and the reason I ask that is, like you're saying, generally, the view is that sex is penetration. After penetration, orgasm, and that is sex. And it's such a terrible way to think about what sex is, because sex could be could be kissing or a full body massage or whatever. That could be an incredibly intimate, passionate experience. I think sometimes there's that almost fear that if you instigate what might be a sexual encounter with a partner, that both of you are thinking, okay, well, this is going to end at this point, as opposed to actually, it might not be about the orgasm. It might not be about this at all. So do you recommend almost knowing, this sounds so wrong, but almost knowing what you want to get from it when you start?
Well, I think that's very limiting. And I think that's where a lot of couples run into problems is that when you have an agenda,
Yeah.
when there's an agenda, we got to get to this certain point, or this certain thing this outcome has to happen. You're already limiting yourself drastically.
Yeah.
And if you're in a relationship where the dynamic is such that your partner's constantly rejecting you, that's probably why. So particularly with women, a lot of it's unconscious until we become conscious of it, but we can smell an agenda a mile away. We can feel it in your touch. If you touch us with trying to get something, our bodies are going to feel. If our minds don't get it, our bodies are going to get it. So if you're in that kind of situation where there's a lot of shutdown happening with your partner and you can't understand like why she doesn't want to just have sex with you, that sometimes is why. It's because there's such an agenda in the touch. And there hasn't been enough spaciousness and non-agenda focused connection and touch. But I will tell you, some of the best sexual experiences I've had haven't included any touch at all. And we rarely consider that that's an option when we talk about sex. So there's really 5 pathways or 5 blueprints. They're called the erotic blueprints. It's a lovely body of work, and it influences some of my pleasure keys. And we're wired differently in terms of what our gateway is into our turn on. And there's sort of 5 primary ways or pathways, and we're each kind of wired more strongly on one of them. And one of the pathways is no touch at all. Some of us are wired such that we have to move very slowly and have a lot of spaciousness. And a lot of, that's the energetic, right? So there's a lot of spaciousness. There can be eye contact. There can be teasing. There can be a lot of anticipation. There can be breath. There can be, again, eye contact. There can be just moving the body into a certain position or a certain glance. So there can be a highly erotic charge created from no touch at all. And we rarely consider that that's even an option on the table, right? That's even available to us. So that's part of it, is we have to really expand our understanding of what sex is. If you ask me, I'll give you my definition of sex. Would you like to hear it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we all tend to think, right, it's like a penetration. It's sticking something in a hole, right? And it's physical, and it's related to the genitals, right?
Yeah.
So sure, that's one thing, but that's not even 100% of the population, by the way. Like I said, some people are wired such that in order for them to even get to that point of desiring genital contact, it takes all these other things that don't involve touch at all. So that's one thing. But my definition of sex really is just it's about union and it's about connection. So if you look at it from that angle, it's really about being connected with self. So what's happening within my internal domain? Am I numb? Am I trying to not feel? Do I have tightness in my chest? Or do I have a lot of sensation happening? Is there some tingling happening? Is there some joy? Am I feeling certain emotions? Am I aware of flows of energy happening through my body? How attuned am I to my own body, my own sensations, my own internal experience? That's the first level of connection. The next level of connection, that's what I would call like the vertical connection. So that's connection to self. And that can also be connection to the divine, to God, universe, our sort of sense of spirit or higher power. How am I connecting in that route vertically, right? Self with universe, self with self. And then we have the horizontal plane, which is self to other, or self to the world externally. How am I connecting out there? And where I see a lot of people get mixed up with this, and why I think a lot of couples sometimes have struggles and I don't feel connected to my partner. Part of what's happening is they don't have that good vertical alignment first. They're not having the access to what is my body actually feeling? What am I wanting? What am I not wanting? What am I sensing? What are my needs right now? What do I see happening out there? Right? My capacity to observe, to witness, to cultivate that level of awareness, both the internal awareness and also the external. What's happening internally? What am I noticing externally? So there's that capacity first. When we do that well, and we're able to have the language and the framework for doing that well, which is part of what my Pleasure Keys process is designed to help couples do, then the connecting with another There's another set of skills, and in the pleasure keys, it's the third triad, which is the triad of negotiating mutually satisfying experiences, which it's a very relational practice.
Mm-hmm.
But, and there's a whole, there's a framework to that, but I can't go horizontal and really be effective if I've not done the vertical work first. We're trying to connect out there when we don't have the clarity in here first. So this is where we begin, is in that vertical alignment. And then once that's clear, and ideally the other person has that same skill set,
Yeah.
then working horizontally or relationally, it becomes much simpler because there's clarity. And ideally couples would have a structure to know how to navigate that gracefully. That's what I do with the pleasure keys. And that's why it's so helpful, I believe, for couples. It really can, it illuminates and clarifies. And anytime there's clarity, there's naturally going to be more connection and more pleasure and more confidence. Pleasure is really I call it like the anatomy of pleasure. There's really like I don't want to call it a recipe, but there's really a structure to it that makes it far less personal. In a lot of ways, we don't have to take things so personally when we really start to see it clearly. You get the bird's eye view, you can really see what's actually happening, and then you can really know how to generate it intentionally rather than it just being like it's a good day today, and we can get a little more intentional around what's going on.
So without asking you to give away everything, how does the pleasure keys process work with a couple? And let me give you a scenario, I guess. So this is, and I mentioned it before. So I'm in a relationship, been in a relationship for over 25 years. Children are about to leave home, and suddenly we'll find ourselves with nobody in the bedroom next door, and nothing. And I think, oh my goodness, how do we have that? Maybe we want to have a conversation about what our lives might look like going forward for lots of different ways, whether it be financially, sort of intimacy, whatever. So if I came to you, if my partner and I came to you and wanted to go through the pleasure keys process to explore that, how might that work in that scenario?
Yeah, I think that's a great example. And again, I'd love to, but I can't do all of it in just a 1 hour podcast. As much as I would love to do that, I'd be happy to. But let me give you something really simple that's like practical, and that like you can take this away right now, and your listeners can use it right now. So the pleasure keys is broken into 3 triads. Each triad has a certain, what I call like a wisdom code.
Okay.
The second triad of the pleasure keys process is what I call the 3 N's. And the 3 N's are notice, name, and negotiate. So it's a beautiful spot. Really, the first triad is really important as well, and I can share that with your listeners. I have a free resource at the end that I'd be happy to share. People can get like those first 3 keys, which is really sort of the foundation of, we have to have that first triad in place ideally. But the 3 N's, it's great because it's easy to remember. You can do this like today. So what you're describing, the first N is notice. So when you're in that moment, laying there next to your partner, what is it that you notice in that moment? What can you notice about the moment? What's available to you. And it might just be that you notice that I'm feeling really disconnected, or I notice that I'm having a hard time speaking up about this, or I'm noticing that I'm wanting a closer connection with my partner right now. So the first key is that key of noticing. This is the second triad of the pleasure keys. So it's about, can I notice? What do I notice? And the second one is name it. So name it. And that would just be literally giving voice to it. In this moment, I'm noticing X. It might also be sometimes with the noticing key, it's, noticing something I want, something I need, something I don't want. Like, so there's a lot kind of inside that noticing, but the second skill is just the naming of it. Can I just give voice to that? Can I bring it into this space between us right now? So whatever that is for you. And so it could just be, I'm noticing that I really am feeling disconnected. I'm noticing I want to have a deeper connection. I'm noticing I want to have a different experience here with you. And I don't know, and I just don't know how to do it. So that's the first piece, the first 2 N's. The third part of that is the negotiating. Okay, so now that I've noticed, right, I'm in the vertical right now. Notice I'm feeling this. I've named it. Now the negotiating is where it becomes, usually, not always, a relational piece. So how do we do that? How do we take the step? How do we create a deeper connection? How would we do that? And sometimes we have to go through the 3 N's several times, right? Really finding more of like, what's the desires? Do I desire to touch you? Do I desire to hold you? Do I desire to be held? And so that's the third triad, which is much more complex. There's a lot more inside of that, and I can't really, it wouldn't be of
Mm.
value to kind of get deep into that so
Yeah.
much today. But the third triad is really the negotiating skills, and there's 3 wisdom codes inside that third triad of how we actually do that in a way that is graceful and where both people are getting what they want, so to speak, where no one's tolerating. We want to get out of sort of the default obligatory yes that we tend to do a lot in relationship, or the habit that I see a lot of couples do of putting our desires on to the other person. So what you might do, for example, if that were happening in the scenario you gave me, you might be lying there really wanting more physical intimacy, let's say. And what that can sometimes sound like is, hey, do you want to cuddle? Do you want to kiss? Do you want
Yeah.
to hug? Instead of the opposite of that would be like, I really would love to cuddle you. I'd love to hold you. I want, like, really owning our desire. It's a totally separate dynamic. We can go into the dynamic of would you like a hug? Would you like a kiss? But that's actually a different touch dynamic entirely. And where a lot of train wrecks happen for couples is we just don't know. We don't understand the difference between those two dynamics of touch. And when we get it and we have the common language for it and a framework for that, it's very clear. We can know exactly whose desire we're following and when. And it really clears up the space so there's far less fear of being rejected because there's more clarity. We know whose desire we're following and when, and we have clarity around it. Someone doesn't have to feel obligated to say yes, which we do that all the time, right? Oh, I
You
guess I
do.
want a hug. Maybe she doesn't. But if it was your desire, I would love to hug you. Would you be
Yeah.
willing, to allow that for me or give me a hug, right? We learn how to ask, and that's really that third triad. And there's a lot inside of that, but that's sort of the
Mm.
essence of it. Learning those skills.
Hmm. When you were saying that, the I'd really like to hold you now. I'd really like to give you a hug. And then he said, okay. So would you like a hug? Would you like me to hold you? And exactly as you said, on the surface, they don't sound that different as words, but actually when you were saying them, they felt very different to me.
Yeah.
And I think the reason that is, I think, is that if I were to ask you or to ask whatever, would you like a hug? Then you're putting the onus back on the other person, and the other person's thinking, do they want to give me a hug, or are they offering to give me a hug, asking if I want a hug because they think I might want a hug? So did he? And my goodness, and rather than if somebody comes up to you and says, "I'd really like to hold you now," or "I'd really like to give you a hug," it's very unambiguous. And like I said, the person can turn around and say, "Look, I'm just not feeling like being held right now, but thank you so much. I respect you for saying it." And it's not. It doesn't feel like you've been turned down, as opposed to, yeah. Sometimes it's just tiring to be asked questions all the time, because the tendencies with the question, the tendencies of the question is like it's so often you sort of say, where do you want to go for dinner tonight? I don't mind. Where do you want to go? No, I asked you that.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
This is such a common
It'd be
one.
so good to come in to me and say, "Oh, I'd really like to go for dinner tonight. Why don't we try blah, blah, blah?" Oh, okay. And I can say no, or I can say yes. But at least there's something for me to say yes or no to, as opposed to, "Oh, I don't mind. Where do you want to go?" Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah,
it's
I totally do.
same, like say with the "I really like to hold you now." That's it. There's not a question to be asked, really. It's like, "Oh, would you really?" It's not. You're not going to ask that. You're going to say, "Well, yeah, that'd be lovely," or "Okay, thank you, but no." It's
Right. And a lot of
very to
times
the point.
yeah, because a lot of times what's happening until you have the understanding of this and the clarity around it, we're
Mm.
asking to get what we want by putting it on the other person. Do you
Yeah,
want a
yeah,
hug? Do you want to go get Mexican food? Do you want to
yeah.
have sex tonight? And that's it. It's a different dynamic. And so I'll clear this up for you and for your listeners really fast. The easiest way to get some clarity here is to understand this is what I say is the number one question every couple should know how to answer if they want to have more connection and more pleasure and fun in the relationship, all the relationships, but especially the intimate relationship. The number one question is to know, who is it for? Who is it for? So if I'm asking you, do you want a hug? Really, what I'm asking is your desire right now to receive a hug from me. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
We don't often use it that way, right?
Mm.
There's not the clarity. We're sort of in the shadowlands of what's happening. And so that's why there can be a lot of what I call like the train wrecks that happen in intimate relationships. But really what I'm asking, if I'm saying, do you want a hug? what I'm asking is it your desire right now to receive a hug from me? Right. So if we get that clarity, so if what I would do is I would pause. If I'm feeling like I want to hug my partner, I might pause. And I'm not saying we do this 100% of the time. I don't do this 100% of the
Yeah.
time with my partner, right? We have sort of blanket agreements and sometimes you're just in the flow with things, right? But when there's sort of uncertainty or fear or train wrecks that are happening, this question will solve a lot of problems. So what you do is you slow down and you notice, is it that I desire to hug? Is it my desire, like that I want to give a hug or I want to be hugged? Or am I concerned that my partner looks like maybe he or she could
Mm.
use a hug? Two very different dynamics. So if you can get
Mhm.
clear on whose desire you're following, it is so much easier. And I can give a really great example of a client that I worked with on this particular issue. Would you like to hear it? Would
I'd
you like
love
me
to
to
hear
share?
it. Yeah, if you're comfortable
Okay.
sharing.
Absolutely. So I had a couple that came to me a couple years back for private coaching, and they were having all kinds of what I call them train wreck moments. Like they would start to be intimate and things would just go south like really fast, and their
Mm.
feelings would be hurt and someone would feel rejected and it would get awkward fast, and they just would give up. Like everything would come to a halt. Let's just try again another time. But to the extent where there was so much anxiety built up around being intimate that they were just
Yeah.
avoiding it. Right, which is a really common challenge that I see a
Mhm.
lot of couples have. Well, come to find out, one of the things that was going on was he would go down on her and, give her oral sex. But
Mhm.
what she was not saying, and he had no idea, he just was kind of doing it also. He just said, well, I just kind of feel like that's like the next thing to do. And I don't know. I mean, I guess that's just, I thought maybe she would like it. And so I go down on her. But come to find out, she really wasn't that into oral sex. Like, it just didn't do a lot for her. She also had women orgasm. Oops, my
Oh, there you are. You're
computer,
back.
it just did something weird. A lot of women orgasm through oral sex, but I never have. So maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm supposed to like it. Maybe I should try to pretend to like it. And so he's going down on her, going like, why isn't she reacting? She's not responding. She's not even having an orgasm. And in her head, she's like, I don't know if I don't really like this, but maybe I'm supposed to like it. And shoot, he's gonna, I don't want to hurt his feelings. And so all this stuff is going on behind the scenes. Nobody's saying anything, right,
Mm.
about it. Well, come to find out, when I asked, well, who is it for? Are you going down on her because you love doing it and it gives you pleasure and like you want to do it just because it really turns you on? Or are you going down on her because you think she wants it and she likes it and it's something that would really get her off? And his answer was like, well, no, like, I mean, it's okay. Like, I'm just kind of doing it to do it. And I don't really know why I'm going down on her. And then I asked her, like, is it your desire? Is it something that you've wanted? Did you ask for that? Or are you just kind of allowing him to do it because you think he wants it? She's like, well, yeah, it's not what I want. I was just sort of allowing him to do it because I thought he wanted it. Well, come to find out, like, nobody wanted this. Neither of them wanted it. So once we got that clarity of who is this happening for, whose desire are you following in this moment? Well, come to find out it was no one's desire. So
Yeah.
that level of clarity helped this couple so much that we were able then to sort of apply that same approach to some other places in their intimate relationship where things were kind of going sideways. And it cleared up probably a good 80% of the challenges they were having. Just that alone. And then it wasn't personal anymore. It's like, hey, because once you understand who it's for, then what can happen is, if I say, would you like a hug? And I have this language and understanding, and I could say, are you asking what my desire is right now? Yeah, I'm asking, is it your desire right now? Then I could say yes or no. I have clarity. Yeah, hug sounds like a lovely gift I'd love to receive. Or, it's not my desire right now to receive a hug. I don't want a hug, but I would be more than willing to hug you if it's something that you desire. If it's your desire and you want to hug, I will absolutely allow a hug with an open and full heart. Right. So then there's the clarity there, and we don't have these
Mm.
train wreck moments, or when the train wrecks happen, we can back out of them pretty quickly and understand why it went south. And then it's actually not personal. It's no longer so personal. And we have to come to terms with the fact that sometimes we're going to desire something, we're going to want something to receive something from our partner. And sometimes the answer is going to be no. A
Mm.
no is never really, it's never a rejection of us. It's really somebody saying yes to themselves. We have to learn to reframe that. But in order to do that, I really think couples need to have that, having a framework and a common language is
Yeah.
it's so invaluable. It makes it far less personal. And that's why I'm so passionate about working with couples, and why I think the pleasure keys process is so useful, because it gives you that framework it gives you the common language and it depersonalizes it. It's not so personal then when somebody says, "Hey, no, I'm not willing," or "No, I don't want that." But what we learn to do is, well, let's find something else that would work for us both. A lot of times there's like a third option that rarely couples are considering.
Mm.
It doesn't have to just be a no and then it's the end of the story. Okay, it's a no to that, but maybe this other thing, could we work this out? Or is there some other aspect of that that wasn't working that maybe part of it was a yes? So can we build around the part that is a yes? So there's a lot of this. It doesn't just have to be the end of the story just because we don't want the same things at the same time.
I think we get sort of stuck in a routine sometimes. We sort of think that, okay, step 1, bit of kissing, step 2, bit of stroking, step 3, blowjob, step 4, go down on her, step 5, penetration, step 6, orgasm. Thank you very much. And it's so, that's so what it's not about. But it's interesting when you were saying that. I was thinking that what I liked about it is knowing what I'm saying yes or no to. And an example of what I mean by that is, so if most people have a particular way of instigating sex, or some people do, I do, I suppose. And it might be stroking my partner's ear or brushing a hairband ear, and that's a sort of signal there, as a sort of prelude to, okay, I'm interested in having sex. And I think sometimes what happens is that the partner might not feel like having sex that night, as in penetration, but would love a cuddle, a hug, a massage, having a hairbrush or whatever. And I think that I think feels so much more valuable to know that it's not sort of the sex we normally have or nothing else. It's what am I saying yes or no to, really. So that thing about, I'd really like just to hold you tonight. I'd really like just to lay here and talk tonight. And I think that feels much more valuable to know what I'm saying yes or no to, as opposed to thinking, now I'm saying no to sex, as opposed to listen to what actually the person wants. So I really like that.
Yeah, it's more in the moment. Like if you're just
Yeah.
listening to your body moment by moment and
Yeah.
you're moving at the speed of that, because I've had that experience with my partner where it's like, we're making out and then we just kind of do the thing because I guess
Yeah.
that's what we're like supposed to do, but then we're both kind of like, I'm just not feeling this at the moment, or
Yeah.
one of us feels
Yeah.
disconnected. But that's okay. And all that is it's a sign to me of like, hey, let's take a pause. Let's just back up a little bit, because sometimes we move too quickly. We try to progress forward too fast, and so that feeling of arousal or the feeling of turn on or even the feeling of being connected, sometimes that just will shut off, and that's just a symptom that we're moving too quickly and maybe getting too goal oriented or having some idea that it has to look some certain way. So if that's happening, the best thing to do is just to back. It's fine to take breaks. It's
Yeah.
better to do that than to kind of keep going with things if you're not feeling it. So just back up. It just means you move too quickly, especially if you're wired energetically or sensually. Those are two of the arousal maps that are used in the erotic blueprints. Those are two of the styles of how we access our arousal, our turn on maps. And if you're wired sensually or energetically, sometimes if you move too quickly towards genital stimulation and in sort of more explicit sexual, what we would consider the sexual archetype, go straight for the genitals, touch the breasts, let's go straight for kissing, like go straight to explicitly sexual activity. That works really great if you're wired under the sexual archetype, right? But if you're not, then that can actually cause you to shut down. So if you can come at it with just in this moment, what is my body feeling? Follow that desire, follow the sensation. That's why that skill of noticing in the pleasure keys of that first N of the 3 N's, why that skill is such a key to almost everything else. If we don't have good access to that, it's going to be very, very hard for us to know, what do I want? What am I a yes to? What am I a no to? What am I noticing right now? Even it might be I don't know what I'm noticing. So let's slow down because I don't know. I have no idea. I just need to pause for a moment so I can kind of regain my center and kind of go back into relaxation, back into awareness, and start to pay attention to where is my turn on right now? What do I want? What do I need? What am I available for? We can slow it down and we can start to meet the moment where it's at instead of trying to make it look a certain way because we've put a label on it called sex, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. And when you were exploring all of this, and you were sort of learning more for yourself and learning how to be a sex therapist and a coach, etc., how did the somatic side of it feel to you? How did you embrace that? And the reason I ask that is that I've had sort of therapy before, regular therapy, I guess, and it's always been very much about what's in their head. And I've often been left with so I went to therapy for grief a little while ago, and I got it almost out of my head, but I was left with a very tangible mass in my gut that I couldn't shift. So it had gone from my head, which is okay, but I was holding on to it, and it's like, okay, now what? But
now
the therapist is lovely, but it was sort of, well, I deal with this bit, and then it's like, okay. So how did the somatic side of things feel to you when you were first exposed to it? How important is it in truly becoming who you want to be and getting through some of the challenges that we face as
Well,
people?
I mean, it's really, excuse me, it's really about a holistic. It's really a holistic approach, because I think what you're describing there, we're more than just our mind, and I think analyzing, there's a certain place for that, but it's exceptionally limited because it's not addressing the whole person and the whole, our thoughts are connected to emotions often, and emotions actually live in the body. It's an aspect of our nervous system, right? It's not something that can be just disconnected, like tends to happen a lot in traditional therapy. So the somatic piece for me, I mean, that it's amazing because my background, I was a massage therapist for 25 years and a dancer. So I've always had this proclivity to work with the body. And intuitively, sexually speaking, very early on. I mean, I went through a traditional mental health training and got the license and did that, but I'm so blessed that very early on, 2 semesters into graduate school, I came across these pathways to sexual healing that were not just from the neck up. It's not just talking about it. It's really about how do you have a different approach to your body by being more present, by when we're goal oriented, we're usually in the mind, by the way. We're not present really in the body. We're sort of in the future. We're anywhere but here now. And the quickest way to get here now is just to start to notice sensation in the body. It's literally the bridge to the present moment. So I was very blessed that I just sort of, not really intentionally, just started to cultivate that within my own experience with my self-pleasure. And then when I worked with the somatic sex therapist, that whole experience was incredible. I mean, that was really truly what made me go, I want to be a sex therapist, and I know that I absolutely am going to work with clients where the body is part of it. And I don't touch clients, I don't do hands-on work with my clients. But this therapist worked with me actually it was all over the phone. I mean, it's a great story. I actually I go into detail in another podcast that I did it's called Girl Boner Radio. If you want to look me up there and hear like the detailed story of it was very trippy, but it changed my life. And it was over the phone. He was guiding me through some practices that involved my body and involved me touching myself and my sexual energy. It changed my life. And I thought, my gosh, like we could help people so much more in sex if this was happening. If we were actually including the sexual energy in their own experience, because there's so much trauma that so many of us have when we start to touch in on the arousal and on the sexual energy, it brings up all kinds of stuff, abandonment, fear, grief, loss. Like a lot of our psychological content is embedded in our sexual energy because that's life force. I mean, Sigmund Freud called it the libido, and libido just means life force. We've made it mean sex or a low sex drive, but libido really at its fundamental essence just means your zest for life, your love for life, the thing that animates, that keeps us alive, that keeps us seeking, desiring, wanting, growing, learning, expanding. That's what libido is. So when we've had experiences over the lifespan that cause us to shut down, we get shamed by society, by religion, by our parents, don't touch yourself. Oh my God, someone's going to walk in. Oh, I got to do this quick. We start to siphon off that life force energy. So it's no longer flowing through our bodies in a way that it's meant to, where we're radiating, where we're feeling alive. It's just about aliveness. So more than anything, the somatic piece is really about helping my couples, my clients be able to just bring that part back online and starting to remove the debris that's in the way of them being able to really feel and embody that. And it, I think a lot of people are really afraid of it. They're afraid if I get in touch with this, a lot of women think I'm going to get negative sexual attention from men, like I'll be too sexy. Or couples fear if this gets turned on, oh my gosh, then what if I want to have sex with my partner? Well, yeah. I mean, if you want it, it would actually be fun. You'd actually be enjoying it. So we're very afraid in general of this part of ourselves. But what I've noticed as I have grown and done the sexual healing on myself over the years is I've really lived more and inhabited my body more and inhabited my genitals, inhabited my and allowed that sexual energy, that life force to move through me. I get far less of that negative attention. I get much more like awe and wonder and reverence. That's the kind of attention that happens because I'm inhabited. I'm
Yeah.
not disconnected. When we're not inhabiting our bodies and not inhabiting our sexuality, that's when other things can get in, right? That's where sort of that slimy kind of energy can come in. And hey, baby, this and that. I mean, if that happens, it actually makes me laugh. If I get catcalled on the road and I'm looking like shit that day, I'm like, really, really, this? Yeah, that's great, man. Like, so there's just a lot more, you're really in your power is really what it is. And so less can really harm us because we're fully embodied. People don't want to mess with that as much. I mean, they'll
Yeah.
even say that, there's studies that have been done on victims of trauma, like people who have been victimized, a number of ways,
Yes.
robbed, raped, whatever. A lot of times a lot of those people have a history already of trauma, and part of
Yeah.
what happens with trauma is we disconnect, we're disassociating, and so repeatedly those kind of experiences happen again and again because something else, there's sort of a weakness in your presence or in your energy body that can translate unconsciously and make you potentially appear to be an easier target because you're not fully inhabiting that.
Yeah.
So there's really a lot to be said for this, and the somatic piece is really, in my opinion, the thing that moves the needle the most, especially when we're talking about intimacy and sex, because those things happen in the body, not in the mind.
Mm. And you can really tell when somebody inhabits their body and has the confidence in who they are. And it's very noticeable in you and other people I talk to, that some people anyway, that they're very much, say only it's the wrong way to put it, but they're very comfortable with what they feel, what they desire, and what they want really. And I think that, and it's an incredibly attractive trait, but I think also it just emanates from somebody versus somebody that's much less secure, and you can very much tell somebody that feels very insecure with who they are.
Yep.
And it's almost a physical stance and a physical way, as well as how somebody looks. It's almost that, are you very much like this, or are you very much like, say,
Yes.
the light shining out of you sort of thing, as opposed to
Sure.
you trying to sort of trap the little bit of light you've got inside you, which I think is,
Yeah. And that's a somatic practice. I actually just had a client I was working with recently where he had a lot of abuse in his
Mhm.
marriage. In fact, his ex-wife was physically abusive towards him. And as he would sit, and his body would close, his arms were crossed,
Yeah.
legs were crossed, and it was sort of this hunched over and sort of this quiet voice. And so one of the things we can do to work with that is, can you think of someone in your life who is confident and who does embody and embrace their sexuality, who's a little bit more sure of themselves. And so he had a family member actually who was, like my brother really is like that. He's really confident and he's, sure of who he is. And I'm like, okay, can you show me what, if you were going to be him for just a minute, if you're going to pretend to be him, like how would he sit? His
Yeah.
whole body changed. Suddenly
Yeah.
his chest is open, his legs are uncrossed, his chin is up. And I'm like, how would you talk if you were him? Just pretend that you're him for a minute. And his everything shifted in what was so interesting. And I'll give this feedback a lot as I'm working with a client. Like, I'll give feedback of how that impacts me. So now how I'm feeling in your presence when you're presenting this way, how I feel when I'm with you is like this versus the other way. I might have them go back to the other way. How I feel when I'm with you like this is kind of how this feels for me. This is what that brings forth in me. So getting that real-time feedback
Mm.
can be, especially for someone who's had a lot of trauma, because we lose access to that. Our feedback from the world becomes distorted, and we're not getting feedback from our own nervous system, right? Because there's sort of there's distortions in the field, and there's a
Yeah.
lot of that disassociating that happens. So that was a practice, a somatic practice for him that had nothing to do with genital touch or sex
Mm.
or anything yet. It helped him embody his confidence and, in a sense, his libido, his life force energy, and that was just through body tweaks. Just move your body, hold your body different, walk through the room like you're him, like you're this family member. How does he move? How does he speak? Now just bring that as part of you. It's just another aspect of you. Obviously have access to it, or you wouldn't have just done it right now, right? We have access to these different parts of ourselves that we don't even realize we have. We don't have to do a whole lot. We don't have to sit in therapy and analyze it for 10 years. You can literally just move your body different or
Yeah.
put on a different piece of clothing. Like I would do that sometimes. Like I was really a number of years ago was working with embodying my inner slut because I had a lot of judgment around the slut energy, believe it or
Mhm.
not. I don't want anyone to think I'm a slut. And oh my God, if I buy these sexy boots, like what are people going to think of me? And I'm a sex therapist and I have to have this like certain persona. I'm like, fuck that. Like, all right, like obviously I have some charge on the slut thing. So how could I intentionally lean into that energy? And I did some of this. I would dress up a certain way. I would set up certain experiences for myself where I could really like just feel myself in that energy. And in that regard, then I wasn't afraid of it anymore. And I didn't worry people were going to think I'm a slut, because it was more of my own judgment around that and not wanting to be perceived a certain way. And therefore people would perceive me as that. And like, well, I'm not that. And said, okay, let's be that. Let's really embody it, own that energy and play with it and have fun with it. So a lot of this stuff can be very fun. And it's a lot more fun than sitting there like trying to figure out what's wrong with you and analyzing it to death and then still feeling that same way, which is what I think the biggest limitation is with most traditional approaches to therapy and
Yeah.
mental health. And that's kind of why I had to leave that world. It just, the limitations,
No,
you've got to really fit inside that box, and I'm kind
I,
of
re- I
afraid. So,
really, I really feel that, and I, yeah, I think the thing that I believe is that everything that I need or want is already within me. And sometimes it'll take somebody else, some guidance, some help, some direction to help bring it out. But
yeah.
I don't think it's a case of trying to add things to who I am. I think it's more a case of, like you say, that guy with his brother, he'd already had that within him, and the
Yes.
desire to wear different, sexy lingerie or high heel boots, whatever. It's already within you, that desire. And yes, it is sexy, and why the hell shouldn't it be? But I'm comfortable feeling that. So I really think we have it. I think a lot of us have repressed, might be too big a word, but we have restricted ourselves exploring that.
Hmm.
And yeah, so if you already have it within you, surely it's easier to get it out than it is if you don't have it at all. Trying to
Well,
create something
I
new.
mean, right, exactly the case, where I shared my story early at the beginning of this conversation with how I found that pathway
Yeah.
to love, pleasure, orgasm, orgasmic experience, full body orgasmic experience. That was, it's already in us. And it's
Mm.
just that we have these obstacles in the way. We have debris that's been built on top. And a lot of that debris is highly correlated with emotional content, for example, shame, fear, maybe grief that's stuck in the body, fear of feeling anger. Like a lot of time, our relationship with our own emotions, like I don't want to feel angry. It was never safe for me and my family to feel angry growing up. So I really shut that emotion down, and that can create a lot of numbness as well. So
Mm.
everything, like we have access to all of it, and it's just a matter of how do we get those obstacles that are not even, I don't like to call them obstacles necessarily, but like what's the debris that's kind of covering up. And the way there is through. So anything that's quote unquote in the way,
Mm.
what's in the way is the way. And that's what's sort of the paradox of the work, right? If we can
Mm.
lean towards, for example, let's see, I'm afraid of feeling judged for being a slut, right? The example I gave a minute ago. Well, hey, so instead of trying to get rid of the fear, Because that's one approach, right? That just actually creates more resistance. It's going to create more
Yep.
tension. It's going to create more stuff in the way if I do that. I'm like, I'm trying to get rid of the fear. What I can do is I can lean into it. Oh, I'm going to buy those thigh high 4-inch heel boots, which are hot, and I'm terrified I'm going to look like a slut. Feel that fear. I'm going to put these boots on. I'm going to walk around the house in these boots, and I'm going to start to feel my sexy self in these boots. And these are hot. Maybe I'll wear them out this weekend, right? So we lean into it and lean towards. It's a quality in my work that I call embrace, the quality of embrace. Can we meet and greet exactly what's there in the moment instead of trying to get rid of it? If I'm trying to get rid of something, I'm creating more stuff in the way. I'm creating more resistance, more tension.
Mm.
If I lean towards it, automatically tension is released. And there's going to be more emotion. There might be more fear initially, but under that, that's probably going to shift to excitement or turn on. It could shift to any number of things if I just say yes to what's there. So that's really the pathway, one of the pathways anyway.
You offer couples retreats. How do you find those more immersive experiences and times? How do you find that they work for people?
Very well. And really, one of the reasons I started doing the retreats
Mm-hmm.
is more of like one of my main ways that I enjoy working with couples is exactly for that reason, because the immersive experience, what I was finding, I still do private coaching, and that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I have a lovely online program as well that helps couples immensely to learn a lot of what we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But the immersion experience is what's so valuable about that is couples can get away from their day to day. So a lot of my clients they're just busy. We're all busy in our lives.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're in your home environment. And so just doing a session a week for however number of months it can work, but it requires a lot more from a couple. They have to be more disciplined. They have to be ready to show up every week. They've got to take time out between our meetings to really engage the
Yeah.
material, or they're not going to get. And so people have a lot of distractions in life. So to be able to just pull away from the habitual surroundings, which it's hard to break a pattern anyway, much less when you're kind of in your common surroundings, to pull away from that, pull away from the work schedules, and then just dive deep into the experience, having that deep experience in your body of some of these principles. It's not a mental thing. It's like you actually learn it through your nervous system. And over the course of, it's a 3-day, the Pleasure Keys retreats, it's a 3-day immersion. Over the course of 3 days, you really get that opportunity to embody it. And then you're going to remember it. And you have then that pathway is now open, or more open than it was when you started. You have the framework, the Pleasure Keys framework, and you have the common language that we learn in that process. So you can leave there and you can start to build on that. You've got an actual foundation now to start to grow from. So it's extremely helpful, and I think the immersion experiences it's really one of the best ways I feel like to learn the Pleasure Keys. And if couples can't do that, sometimes people aren't able to travel for whatever reason, or the
Mm.
in-person just doesn't work. I do have clients internationally. I do offer an online program called Back on the Same Page, and I have, that's coming up actually in a couple of months. I have a cohort forming for that, and it's also a lovely way to learn the work and start to take that first step. Some couples, an in-person experience is just a little bit too intimidating for some couples. It's a little bit more than what they feel they can take on right away. So if you're just having a hard time taking that first step, there's other ways to do that and really get some structure. Couples need
Yeah.
structure. Yeah, that's how you have success. You have structure, you have accountability, and community is so important. We have so much shame around this. A lot of couples want to hide. They think they're the only ones suffering, or they're ashamed that they're having intimacy. We don't need to be ashamed. I promise you, just about every single person out there, if they're not having a challenge now, they have in the past, or they will in the future, and you're not alone. So being in community around this is so important because we normalize it. And it's a way to normalize it and make it far less shameful, and just something that we all go through, and we can support one another. I really believe that it's the community that keeps a couple together, and we've really lost that in our society. I think we forget that. I've always believed it's the community that marries a couple. When we get married, we stand in front of a community of our
Do.
friends and family. But why does nobody step up when that couple is struggling? Why does nobody step in and try to hold that couple to have that healing? But and
Mm.
part of the reason we don't do that is because there's so much shame around it, and we all think like, well, it's not my place. I'm not, but really, I think we need to change that, honestly. We need to start to have more of a communal understanding of a marriage or a relationship. And when two people are together and we see them struggling, how can we step in to support that couple with their commitments to one another? And sometimes relationships aren't meant to stay together. I
Mm.
do believe, obviously, I didn't stay in my marriage and for good reason. And I'm glad that
Yeah.
I didn't. But I also think there's a lot more that we can do to help one another, and that's part of why being in community, especially around intimacy and sexuality, challenges in relationship, we heal together and we grow together. We don't become ourselves by ourselves, as one of my mentors used to say. We become ourselves through others and through community.
Mm. Do you think we are naturally more comfortable with monogamy, or do you think another path can be just as fulfilling? Polygamy, I guess.
Well, polyamory or non-monogamy is a
Mm.
really hot topic
It
today.
is.
It's
Yeah.
very trendy, and I think it's up to each person to decide what's right for themselves. I'm never going to tell somebody else what they should
Mhm.
or shouldn't do. I think naturally, of course, we're going to crave novelty after being in a long-term relationship, because you hit what's called sexual satiety and habituation, where we become accustomed to the other. Most couples also have not been trained in the skills of keeping the fire alive, of polarity,
Yeah.
which is really like, there's really a practice of polarity where you can consciously create that magnetic attraction, but you have to work on it. Otherwise it almost always dies in long-term relationships. So I think what tends to happen, unless couples are resourced in that sacred intimacy practice of polarity and how to do that, and they have a
Mm.
practice of it, what most couples might end up defaulting to is, let's open the relationship, because we naturally seek novelty. We naturally seek something new and different. That's what creates the dopamine letdown in the brain, that it's one of the pleasure chemicals.
Mhm.
And so some of the ways couples do that is by going into non-monogamy. And some people are just wired for that. That's literally truly the relationship style that fits them the best. And they've always
Yeah.
kind of been that way. But we've normalized to such an extent the monogamy. So I think it's such an individual choice. And I would never be someone to say like one thing is better than the other. I know
Mm.
what's best for me.
Mhm.
I know what I prefer and what I like and what I enjoy, and the choices that I make. But regardless of what path you choose, if you go non-monogamy, monogamy, some version in between, there's always challenges that come with each. One path isn't necessarily easier than the other. If anything, non-monogamy is a lot more complex and a lot more complicated, because you're now potentially involving a
Oh,
lot more
absolutely.
emotions and
Yeah.
feelings and other people and other
Yeah.
psychologies, and yeah, so, and if
Mm.
you don't have the skills for really understanding how to do that and do it well, it can really be a train wreck. And I unfortunately have seen that happen with some of the couples that I've worked with who were wanting to open. There's wonderful people out there in the world, though, who can
Yeah.
guide you through that. So I'd be happy to share a couple of resources. If any of your listeners want, I can send you the experts on that. Just reach out to me and I'll give you a couple of referrals.
But it is interesting though that, like, say we reached the, I can't remember the word you used, but the sort of sexual, what was it? When we sort of reached a plateau, or we've sort of
Satiety, or yeah, sexual
satiety.
satiety, where it's like, okay, you just have that full feeling, or habituation, where we just get so accustomed
Yeah.
to being with a partner that it just flatline. It kind of just flatlines. Like you're just, okay,
Yeah.
kind of bored. It's not
And
new and exciting.
yeah, and this isn't an example of polyamory at all, and I'm not trying to suggest it is, but I had an associate, I guess, that sort of felt, was getting bored or reached a certain point in their sort of marriage and decided to have an affair, and he would just sort of come in and sort of talk about this quite openly, and it was almost as if he couldn't hear what he was saying. He said, "Oh, I meet up with her sort of once a month, and we go to a hotel, and it's really, really lovely, and we get room service, and the sex is amazing." And I was sort of sat there thinking, well, so you mean there's the sex at home where your kids are in a room next door, you're complaining about the washing up, the fridge is leaking again,
Yeah.
isn't as good as the sex you have in this beautiful hotel with a woman you see once a month, and all you're doing is pleasuring each other?
Right.
It just bewildered me that he couldn't sort of see that it wasn't, the sex isn't any better. It's just a completely different scenario. It's just
Yes.
so
Well,
different. You can't compare the two. It just felt so Yeah.
Context is a really big part of
Yes,
that we
context.
tend to
Perfect.
discount. And there's also a reason why the oldest profession in the world is so successful. I mean,
Absolutely.
for that very reason, because you don't have sort of that burden of the day-to-day grind, which can
Yeah.
absolutely just kill. It can just really kill it for a lot of couples. And I'm not by
Yeah.
any means condoning go have an affair, or, like, make sure if you're going to do that, that's a consensual thing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you need to look at your relationship.
Yeah.
And I mean, one of the best ways to get the passion going again in a relationship is just start telling the truth. And a lot of couples, don't even realize over the years how much avoidance is actually happening and how much they're not really just laying it all out on the table. And that can really create a really big charge pretty quickly, because it's when we don't speak truth and we
Mm.
withhold and we tolerate and we go along with, and we're not really asking for what we want or speaking what we want or saying what we feel, or asking for what we need or giving to our partner what they need because they're not saying it. We're making assumptions all the time. We're making up stories in our head. Now you've got disconnect happening. So the quickest way back to connection, just start telling the truth. I feel, I notice, I want, I need. What about you? Tell me, what do you notice? What do you see? What do you want? What do you need? If you were just to lay it all on the table, yeah, it might blow some things up, but I'll tell you that energy is going to come back real fast. All that repressed energy, all that libido, life force energy that's been siphoned off through the denial, that's going to come back pretty fast. And it's possible it could look ugly. That could cause a fight. But I'll tell you what, even a fight's better than a flat line. There's energy
Yeah.
there, right?
100%. And people, sort of come away and think, oh, my sex life's not fulfilling, it's not enjoyable, it's not exciting, whatever. If you sort of ask them to really, really unpick what your sex life is, and it's somewhat, so it's the same thing you've been doing for the last 20 years. You've not thought about role playing or doing this or doing that. There's so many millions of ways to inject freshness and excitement. And like you say, talking and sharing what is your truth really is so important. I've taken a lot of your time, so sorry, but I just want a couple more questions, if that's okay. One of which is, you obviously have couples that come to you, or individuals come to you at a time in their life where they are looking for help. They may be face some challenges. They may have been through a trauma, as you said before. How do you make sure you protect and nourish your own mental and physical well-being? Because you want to give the best of yourself, but you don't want to take on everything that people are giving you.
No, I do my own work. I put myself in the student role.
Okay.
I have mentors that I study with and teachers that I study with, and and I also have an amazing partner who's really incredible, and we work on this stuff. I live what I teach. I can't tell some client to go start telling the truth if I'm not even willing to do it in my own relationship, and I don't teach anything that I don't personally practice. And I have to put myself in scenarios where I'm the student or I'm the client. And I do. I have my teachers and my mentors, and I just soak it up. When I'm in that, I take it. I'm not trying to heal anyone else. I go and I take what's there for me. It's all about me. When I'm the client, I'm the student. Yep, I don't default into healer role. Let me hold space for the group. I get really, I'm paying for this, and I'm here for myself. I'm here to get what I need for me. And so I really, really make sure that I'm doing that. And I think it's so important, especially when you're in a helping role like I am. You have to be putting yourself in the client's shoes, and to have appreciation for how uncomfortable that can be and how vulnerable it is for somebody to come sit in front of me and disclose very, very personal things about their sex life or their marriage or their intimate life. I have to be willing to put myself in that same position.
I think what I would love about, if I came to see you, would be the fact that you are very open, that you don't know everything. There's still lots to learn. I think some people think, I've know it all, I'll just take what they're there. But I think the very fact that you are on a constant learning journey, you want to explore what gives you pleasure, what you enjoy, you want to push yourself and try and learn. I think that's so fabulous. So my final question would be, what would you like the future of your practice to be? So you've got so many clearly developed things. The keys are very clear. I really love the notice, name, negotiate, all the other triads and things. You've got all of that there now, and the couples retreats and things. You can't clone yourself, unfortunately. So how would you like your practice to have been if you look back from 20 years in the future? What would have happened?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm living it. And it's always growing and shifting. And I moved to the top of a mountain in Western North
Yes.
Carolina 2 years ago. So my practice changed drastically. Really, when I moved, I went online. So I primarily work with clients now online and around the world. I'm not localized anymore like I was when I was living in Austin, Texas. And part of how I've shifted is the retreats, the Pleasure Keys retreats, and doing those in-person events is really one of the ways I see those happening really all over the world. And I also see myself training other facilitators to lead those experiences because I love them. I think it's what moves the needle the most for couples, so transformative. So I see more of that happening. And then my program Back on the Same Page, which is something that it took me a long time to really come up with how can I get this information to more people who perhaps can't attend a retreat or for
Yeah.
whom private coaching is just more than what they either need or can afford, because that can be a lot more expensive to do the one-on-one work. So I have Back on
Yeah.
the Same Page, which that's a beautiful deep dive into the pleasure keys, into communication structures, really how you get back on the same page. It's all the key elements that a couple would need in order to bridge that gap from disconnection back into connection and really getting more ease and flow and fun and intimacy. And that's offered entirely online. And I over deliver in that. I mean, I don't hold anything back because what makes me the happiest, I want to see the world be a better place with happier relationships and people having fulfilling, intimate sex lives. To me is literally what changes the world. I mean, we're not in an intimate relationship to have no sex, in my opinion. Like, that's the thing that sets aside a marriage or an intimate relationship from all the other relationships that we have in life. So if something's not happening in that domain, then how is that relationship any different? What are we not wanting to feel? What's being avoided? And what's possible when we open more deeply into that part of our relationship? What's possible? There's so much more available. So that's my passion, is to see that. And I think eventually also to see marriages succeed from the beginning. I think if a lot of couples had this knowledge starting out in a marriage or even
Yes.
before they got married, that there would really be far fewer problems later in the marriage, because couples sit on a problem an average of 7 years before seeking.
It's a long time, isn't it?
Kids and a mortgage and life's more complicated. Like, why not get these skills earlier rather than later? And I think it could save a lot of marriages and make the world a better place. So that's my vision.
You've got to write that book we can all give to our friends when they get married.
It's on the way. It's good.
Really awesome.
I'll let you know when it's out.
No, it definitely is. You've got a hell of a story to tell, and I think it's worth listening to.
Thank you so much.
That last answer and all your answers were really great, and I hoped you'd be open and expressive, and you certainly were.
Well, thank you so much. And I'd love to give your listeners a free resource too, if they would like to.
Oh, that'd be fabulous.
Grab So we talked about the pleasure keys today, and there's 3 triads. The first triad I talk about in my guide, the Pleasure Keys ebook. So if anyone's interested in learning how to really build that foundation to deepen connection and enhance pleasure, you can get that at pleasurekeys.com, and you can get a free copy of that right there. And it's sort of a really nice spot with a little bit more practical steps. If anyone wants to know, like, how do I actually apply what we talked about, that'd be a great spot for your listeners to start.
Awesome.
So
I'll put the link into the notes. That's really kind of you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time. And
thank you so much.
Your wisdom.
Thank you.